Welcome back to the Musical Connections podcast. I'm your host, Zach Snow, and we are going to introduce you to somebody who has been an up-and-coming singer-songwriter for a couple of years. He held a successful underground sound show at the Rock House last month, and he is moving to Calgary to continue his budding music career. And joining me right now is currently Toronto-based, but St. John's-born singer-songwriter, Alex Duffy. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. How are you? Pleasure to be here.
And thank you so much again for coming on to the podcast. This is episode 88, so it's been 88 episodes too long.
It's a lot of work you put in. This is great to be here. I'm really excited to have a chat.
And thank you again for coming on. So you're here in the province now for about a few months for a little trip. So tell me a little bit about what brings you here to begin with.
So I grew up like Torbay my whole life, and then about 2 years ago, I was applying to schools and stuff, kind of around the time I did music too. And we went to Toronto, me and my girlfriend. I ended up doing business up there, playing a bunch of shows and stuff, but she actually got into a different program in Calgary. So when we found that out, we were like, okay, we got to go home and save on rent for a couple months. So we came back to Newfoundland, put all our stuff in storage, and now in about a week or so, we're going to fly back to Toronto and drive over to Calgary. So it's going to be a trip, but it's good to be home for the summer. It was a great summer.
Oh, I'd say.
Yeah.
And just the amount of traffic that's been coming here downtown where the office is located.
Oh, yeah.
Cruise ships galore.
Crazy. Yeah, it's been super eventful. We only got to do the one show this summer, but, you know, it was kind of everything I hoped for. So
yeah, and that one show ended up being the Underground Sounds. So it was you, it was Until Toronto, Marrow, and I believe Albert Dalton Scarlett.
Yep.
And there was a couple of other acts that I think that may be all of them, but I'm not sure.
Yeah,
but,
Nerve Shack was also there.
Oh, Nerve Shack. Yeah,
Yeah.
they're with the Hurricane Music and doing work with them.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about how the Underground Sounds show came to be.
So it's actually mostly because I was playing shows in Toronto, and I collaborated with Albert on my album, but I hadn't met him yet. Like, we worked together and stuff, but I wanted to kind of do a show different because I've played a lot of shows here in Newfoundland, and it's always like, you know, 3 bands, no host, you just pay your $15 and show up. And in Toronto, it's not like that. Like, the shows I played in Toronto were all like really weird. Like, I played a rap show. I don't rap, but me and a trio did a show. Like, there was 20 acts all on the same night. Everybody gets like a 5 or 10 minute set, which is crazy. Like, because the quantity of artists you'd need here to do that is insane.
Yes.
Right? So I was doing that, and the show pulled out like 150 plus people, and we played as a band in the middle, and it was very divisive because it was a rap audience, and everybody was kind of like, I don't know if I like this or they love it, but it was just cool to do something different, and kind of that sparked my idea for the Underground Sounds thing. I wanted to highlight local artists, keep the door price low, and try to do something different. So we had 4 bands. One of them was Albert, who's not really a band, but he raps. And it was just kind of like taking what I learned in Toronto to here. Like, we set up a vendor table that wasn't like merch. It was somebody selling soaps and body wash and stuff, and they did great.
Yeah, I believe that's Scarlett's side business.
Yeah, it is. And amazing soaps. Her display was beautiful. It was exactly what I was hoping for, and people seemed to love it. And I did kind of giveaways, but the giveaways were like dinkies and stuff. Like, it wasn't anything, you know, substantial, but
yeah, listen, man, nothing wrong with dinkies. I used to play with them a lot when I was a kid.
I gave out goggles as like the grand prize, like swimming goggles. But I was trying to do something fun, right? So on top of like having more bands, keeping the price down, I also hosted it, which was like new to me, but I think it added a bit of personability to the show, because then the bands don't have to introduce themselves and say, oh, here's your next act. And whenever I played in my band, I always felt like I didn't want to have to remember who the other bands were and thank the organizers. Like, it was so much mental work as a musician to do that. So I thought, like, okay, I'll host it and I'll do that. So the bands can just play music and kind of make an event of it.
So, did you have a team around this Underground Sounds, or was it just yourself dealing with all these different personalities to make this one show happen?
It was my friend Ryan Doyle, who was in the Lodge, and he's also in Until Toronto. He helped a good bit, and everybody kind of collaborated. As far as like the posters and booking people and all that, I did most of that myself. But it's not really new to me to like. I've always been like a DIY kind of guy. Like everything I do in life, I try to do as much as I can myself. So it's kind of like with that attitude, like it's easier for me to just do it, right? Than try to ask others to help. And, I was just like, I can do it.
Yeah, but do you think that like that little bit of help, and especially with people with experience in those kind of fields that maybe sometimes you kind of like struggle with, could have helped you out putting together a more cohesive event?
Oh, 100%. I think if I were to do it again, I'd love to do it again, but this was kind of like a test event.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so different. I didn't know if people would vibe with it, like it. But the people who went were very happy. Like, I got people complimenting me about the event, not the music, which I've never had that before. It's always been like great set and stuff like that. But there were people coming up, they were like, I had a lot of fun tonight. I was like, that's what I want. So if I could collaborate with others that can kind of bring other perspectives to it, I'm 100% down.
Yes, and it's another platform for musicians to get their stuff heard and be featured on a larger scale. Now,
totally.
I'm not saying like that's Underground Sounds is like the largest scale. It's only like a test run, but you never know what it could be, say 5 or 10 years down the line if you continue to do it year after year.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that. Actually, I was this idea sparked a couple of years ago. My dad, he's heavily involved in charities and stuff, and we were talking about wanting to support local music more, because whenever you do a show, there's a lot of times you do a show for like no money or for, very little funds, and it's all about, you get your notoriety and stuff, right? But I feel like it's unfair to put that on musicians. So I wanted, like, this event was a test of like maybe a larger event where it's all about supporting local music, which actually Dean Clark from Radio.
Jigs and Reels Radio, KW.
Yeah, he has
in Kitchener-Waterloo.
He has an event that is basically what I wanted to do on Saturday and Sunday coming up, I think, or Friday and Saturday.
Yeah, so by the time that this airs, it'll already been taking place. But even then, too, like, it's great to see people like him, and congratulations to Dean as well on the nomination for Media Person of the Year. He's doing great work with the Jigs and Reels radio show.
Both of you are. It's great.
Thank you so much. But it's also impressive to see him, do that from Ontario. He has roots in this province, but just to cover music from Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario, to me, that's very impressive. I mean, it may not sound impressive to most people, but for me, who is in the same field as him, that's impressive.
Yeah. And I think he has that same goal, and there's a lot of players in this industry who are kind of trying to do that, just emphasize like the talent we have here that's maybe non-traditional music. Like, obviously traditional music, everybody's great here, like every band.
Yeah, it's the first thing you associate with Newfoundland music.
But there's also people who are doing crazy, amazing things like Albert Dalton and Nerve Shack and Marrow. Like, they're all innovators in their own genres, and that's kind of what I wanted to highlight. Like, look at the hip hop community we have here. It's insane. Like,
yeah.
Right?
I was to a Mem Morris Maximus show, and congratulations to Luke Berry on his nomination.
For sure.
I was to a show last year where Sarcastodon, DJ Slim Macho, and Albert Dalton and Reggie Morales.
Yeah.
I saw what they brought to the table when it comes to the hip-hop community, and I put out a post on my story that night saying, Newfoundland and Labrador's hip-hop community should be watched here, because there's something special really going on here.
Oh, man.
And just the list of nominees for this year, 6 nominees in that category. And I think that's the most that can be, but it goes to show like how much coverage, like how much one person can really do the coverage of one scene can really, help that scene explode.
Totally. And everybody on that nomination list is killing it. Like, it's I feel like it's a bit of a niche market, and that's why everybody who's coming out in it are doing like they got to bring a certain
style,
charisma and style to it, and they're trying harder than some other people, like, not to bash other communities, but like, it seems like there's something unique coming out because they're doing something different. Like,
yeah, that's true. But like, there's nothing about like the communities, but like they're in different places when it
Totally.
comes to the Newfoundland and Labrador music sector. I mean, trad is like right at the very top, and then you probably put country and contemporary folk there.
Yeah.
Rock and pop there as well. But you look at genres like jazz and blues and hip hop and loud music. There was the Heavy Newfoundland and Labrador Festival that Ben Chapman Smith,
Yep.
Greg Sweet Apple, and the rest of them put off. Like, if you have these platforms for people to showcase what they're truly about, the better it'll be for the music scene.
Totally. And it feels like there's momentum going. So I'm hoping that carries forward. And I'll be in Calgary for a while, but I'll be coming back every summer. So I'm hoping to do a show every summer at least, going forward. And I love being a part of this community.
So why move to Calgary?
So my girlfriend actually got into school up there, and that was most of the catalyst for the decision. Like, we were in Toronto because I was in school, she was getting into school, and then, we lived there for a while. We made some great friends. I was really sad to leave Toronto, but at the same time, it's like, I've already left home, so why not go further, I've always been interested in seeing what it's like living other places. Newfoundland is always home. It always will be. I plan to raise kids here. This is home. But Calgary, I think, is just, another place I can get to know and see what it's like out there. So
yeah, and Alberta's a pretty common place for Newfoundlanders and Labradorians to go and move away for work.
Totally.
I mean, you look at one of the bands from Newfoundland and Labrador that are based in Edmonton now, the Darina Harvey Band.
Right.
They are based in Edmonton, but 4 out of the 5 original members are from Newfoundland and Labrador, with Darina being from Wabush.
Oh, okay. Wow. Yeah, it's there's a lot of Newfoundlanders out there. Not as much in Toronto. I found it's funny. When I moved to Toronto at first. Also, I can never stop talking about Newfoundland, which is very annoying for all my Toronto friends because it's just like, oh, in Newfoundland, right? But going to Toronto, it felt like I was really unique coming from Newfoundland. Like, people seem more surprised when I said I'm from Newfoundland than other people I was meeting from like India and China and like all these other province or countries. People were like, "Oh, you're from Newfoundland?" I was like, "Yes, that's not very interesting compared to somebody from India, first time in Canada. Like, their culture is way different. Why are you so obsessed with Newfoundland?" But
our culture here in Newfoundland and Labrador is very unique compared to many of the other provinces outside out on the West Coast.
Totally,
and even
yeah.
in Central as well. I mean, compared to Toronto, I mean, they have a unique culture. They're like one of the largest cities in Canada.
100%.
Compared to St. John's, where we have about 100 to 150,000 people here in town. We have our own unique way of doing things.
Totally. And Toronto does too, for sure. Like, I think everywhere is unique, and it's just like, a blend of cultures. Like, it's cool to learn about all of it,
For sure. Now, you grew up in Torbay, so how did this all start for you? How did you get into music?
I've always kind of been musical, ish. When I was like, my parents are not really musical. I don't really have a musical family background. My dad played guitar when I was a kid. It's not his job, but he always played guitar. And I think that was a big catalyst for it. When I was in elementary school, I kind of saw him playing guitar, and I was like, I want to do that, right? So I was in lessons for like a year, but I hated it because it was too hard. So I quit in grade 6. And then I actually started playing music again. My cousin doesn't know this, my cousin Colby, but my dad started teaching my cousin guitar like years later in grade 8 or 9 or something.
Oh,
and
wow.
I was really mad because I was jealous that my dad was teaching my cousin. So I was like, I'm learning guitar. Screw this, right? So that was
kind
kind
of
of
first.
Yeah, exactly. Shout out my family. So I kind of like started actually playing and singing and stuff then. Like, I sang at the time, which that was another start, but like actually playing and singing. And then I didn't start writing music until like 2018. It was a hard year, I think. A lot of personal stuff in my life, like a lot of loss, a lot of, heartache. So I needed an outlet, and I found it in a guitar, basically. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I wrote my first couple songs, and I felt like I had something to say. And it's funny, some of the songs I wrote back then are the ones that are on this album now.
Oh, wow.
Because as soon as I started doing music, this is the album I wanted to make, like 5 years ago. But it took me a really long time to piece all the ideas together. So some of the songs off the album are songs I started writing like 5-6 years ago. Some of the first songs I wrote. But yeah, that's kind of what it all started. And I played with my friends in the lodge, and we kind of made some fun music. And yeah, that was the beginning.
So the lodge, would that be in Torbay by chance? Yeah.
So it was my friend Ryan Doyle, my friend Ryan Witten, and my friend James Titford. That's what we started. We started just by playing some covers and stuff, as all bands do. And then I had a few originals that I had thrown together, and we were like, let's record it. Like, I had a cracked version of Pro Tools 9 on my computer, and we recorded it all in the basement. I didn't mix it, but I paid somebody on Fiverr like $40 to mix and master everything. And that goes for all of the first Xander stuff and all the Lodge stuff. That was all paid to some guy on Fiverr for mixing and mastering.
Wow.
So that's how we started. And then I didn't like paying people on Fiverr because I didn't have any money. So I just started teaching myself more and more. And that's kind of where we are now. Like, I do it all myself.
Yeah.
After many, many years of sitting there for hundreds of hours.
Yeah, and that's where the DIY attitude really comes into play here, because a lot of the album, especially with the Charlie's Volume 1, you've done yourself.
Yeah. I obviously collaborate with people. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say I completely did it myself. Like,
oh no.
Ryan Doyle, I got to give a shout out to him. He's probably my number one collaborator. He hasn't really recorded on anything, but I send him every horrible demo I've ever recorded, and he tells me it's bad. So having a friend that is honest is like the best part.
Yeah, and then the second opinion too, where it's not just yourself, that can be very helpful to better yourself and getting the version that you want to be out to the public.
Totally. And sometimes he's harsh too. Like, I'll send him something.
Sometimes you need that.
And I think it's great. I send it to him and he's like, that's not it. And then I'm like, what do you mean it's not? And I get there's a few times I got really mad because he's like, but like I'm glad he was so critical, because if he wasn't, I would have put something out and then been upset with it, months, years later.
Oh,
right?
yes, absolutely. You'll regret putting that out.
Oh, yeah. So everything I'm putting out now, I'm very happy with how it's kind of come about. Yeah.
For sure. Now, who are some of your influences to help you, create that Alex Duffy signature sound?
I think it's kind of a mixed bag, like most people. Growing up, I listened to a lot of jazz, like in elementary or junior high, a lot of jazz. Louis Armstrong was my number one. And I listened to a lot of the Beatles. Reggae, Bob Marley was huge for me.
Wow.
I never smoked weed or anything, but I'd sit around. I don't know. I had this obsession with Bob Marley for a lot of years. And then, of course, country, specifically Randy Travis, because my dad used to have an old truck with a cassette stuck in it. And every time we drove anywhere, Randy Travis was playing. So,
do you know which one that was?
Old 8x10. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
nice.
I know every song off that album front to back. And I think you can definitely hear elements of that in my songwriting. But with the newest stuff, I was really fascinated with some newer songwriters. Like there's a guy called Dijon. I don't know if you know him, but he does like alt R&B. He's really inspired by like Frank Ocean and that kind of group.
Okay.
But I really loved just the weird stuff he was doing, and I was like, I could do that, right? And I thought it really served the story to kind of add those weirder alternative elements, and it feels much more like distinct to me now. Like I finally feel like I've found my sound, and I'm really proud of all the influences that have kind of been a part of that. the number one, I don't know how I forgot, Bill Withers is my number one all-time musician. I love everything he's ever made. So
what about Bill Withers? So what about him makes him your number one in your book?
I don't know. I think it's just he felt genuine, and that honesty in those recordings is kind of my favorite part about music, is like hearing real emotion from somebody. And that's why I love Dijon too, because you hear him crying like in the song sometimes, right? Not Bill Withers, but you can feel Bill Withers' emotion in those tracks. Yeah. And that's kind of what I wanted to convey with the album. On certain tracks, I really wanted you to feel for the character and kind of get in that headspace, which some of it's not polished. It's not good, like commercially, but it I hope it conveys that emotion and that honesty, you know.
So you say characters. Let's go to Charlie's Volume 1, because that's the album you put out recently.
Yeah.
Would you call Charlie's Volume 1 a concept record?
Totally. Yeah. The whole idea, I was gonna not say what the concept was, but nobody's pondering it, right? You know what I mean? So I'm torn, like telling people what the album's about, but I feel like a good summary should be out there maybe. So it's kind of, I wanted to tell like a simple story, but something meaningful. So it's sort of paralleled with like me and my desire to pursue music. But basically the story is this guy, Charlie, he is very much in love. He's, you know, this is set in the 90s or something, and he's feeling unfulfilled in life. He's in love with a woman named Lucy. They live together. They're probably about to start a family, but he feels like he never gave it his shot. Like he's always wanted to go try, but he never did. So the album kind of opens with him leaving Lucy and not telling her, not because he doesn't love her, but because he can't do it with her, and he knows if he stays, he'll never feel like he gave his dreams a shot.
Yes.
Right? So the opening track is him telling Lucy's mother to tell her that he left. And it's set in the 90s because she can't reach out to him. Like that's a big part of the story.
Yeah, it was around that time where like, you know, cell phones and the internet were really just starting to
so he disappeared. She has no idea where he is, right? And that's kind of where the story takes off, and I think ultimately it's a story about like selfishness and sacrifice. It's a bit of a tragedy, I think, but I think there's a lot of lessons to be had in it. Not to sound pretentious.
You're not sounding pretentious to me.
But I really wanted to do something that the story is fairly obvious, because concept albums, sometimes you listen to them and you have no idea what the story is, like unless you've heard what it is. But I feel like you can almost get a sense of the story in mind, because I was trying to make a really simple story as my first go. Because it's making a concept album is hard enough, let alone if I had a really difficult, complex story.
Sure.
Right?
And you also want to make sure all the songs make sense on that record as well.
And they're good. They got to be good.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's a 7-track record. And I believe you're working now on Charlie's Volume 2.
Yeah.
So what's the status on that now?
So it was always supposed to be like a full, 14-track album. But I put out Volume 1 because there's a natural break in the story at the end of Volume 1. And also, I delayed it because I didn't finish Volume 2 when Volume 1 was done. So
what?
I was like, so I was like, I need more time to finish it. So I'll put out Volume 1, and then I was going to put it out in July, but I hadn't finished it up to that point either.
Oh my God.
But it is finished now, and Volume 2 is going to come out August 31st, I think. I haven't fully decided, but I think that's a good date.
Well, listen, man, it's whenever you're ready. It'll be featured on Newfound Releases no matter what. So,
I'll send it to you.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, and it's a different vibe from the first half. I think the first half kind of builds this hype, kind of like it gets a bit more upbeat and stuff, but the second half is a slower vibe, but I think it rounds out the story nicely. So I'm really excited to hear kind of what people think about it, and hope it does okay, you know.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, you're moving to Calgary in about a few weeks from now, and say by the time this airs, you were already planning to go back to Ontario, then to drive to Calgary.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about the initial move to Ontario.
Yeah.
So, why move to Ontario?
It was mostly like school. I had applied a bunch of places to do more business. I went to MUN for business, and I wanted to do my master's. And so I got in a few places, but then it was basically like my girlfriend got in Toronto, so I was like, all right, we're going to Toronto. I'm going wherever she goes. And I never thought I'd live in Toronto. I always thought I'd go to Halifax or something. Toronto wasn't really in the cards for me, so it was kind of crazy, like when we moved there, because the first day, we signed the lease to an apartment, not having been there, just seen pictures of it, and then we landed and immediately threw our bags in our apartment, drove to Costco, bought a mattress, and then it was like, all right, we live here now. And neither of us had lived outside of our parents' house, so it was like our first time living together, and now we're in Toronto, like in this apartment. So it was a lot of change, and it took me a while to kind of fall into the music industry there, because it's a much bigger industry, but I feel it's more guarded almost to get into. Like here, it felt like I could play a show almost immediately. Like when me and the guys first started playing, all I did was like email the ship or something, and they were like, yeah, come by, and it was almost instant.
Yeah, Tony would book you in a heartbeat.
Yeah, and it was like perfect for that. But then Toronto was like, I played a lot of, and this isn't shaming Toronto or anything, it was just like getting started was way harder because I had to go to open mics, and I played the Horseshoe a couple times, but the first time was like at the end of a new music night, which is on a Tuesday at midnight, and there's 2 people, and it's no cover, and you get a 20-minute set, and those were the kinds of shows that I had to do at first, until you start to build kind of, I guess, a reputation, because then people start answering my emails, like when they had seen that I played in some venues.
And to build that portfolio and that dossier.
Which is different than here, because here it was like, you could immediately play the Ship or the Black Sheep or the Rock House is a bit harder because it's bigger, but like still the people at all those venues are very responsive.
Battery Cafe I probably put into that category as well.
Totally, yeah. And it's like in Toronto I wouldn't get answers to emails for most of the venues, and it was just quicker, like everything's more because they have more people probably emailing them like over and over, and so I think having that reputation built up really helps to book shows there. So eventually it worked out, and I ended up playing, like I linked up with some cool organizers and did some really interesting shows, but it was a real slow burn. Like I was there 2 years, I only played 5 or 6 shows, I'd say.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's one word that stuck to me in your answer there when I'm talking about the move to Ontario. You're saying that, the music scene in Toronto is guarded. Guarded in what way?
I think it goes back to there being so many people and there's more money in it. It feels like you need to know people. And I think that's kind of very, it's broad, but I feel like it applies to most of larger cities and those industries. It's like there's so many options. How do you pick like who's good? How do I pick who's going to put a good show? Whereas here, like we're a smaller community, and obviously there's new bands coming up all the time in Newfoundland.
Oh yes.
But still those bands have more of an opportunity to kind of showcase, at least in my opinion, they have an easier time to go showcase themselves. Where in Toronto, it's there's more people, but it's more spread out because on a Friday night here, there'll be 3 bars that have live bands, like downtown. There's a few options. More than 3, but you get my point.
But you got like the 3 big ones, like the Ship, the Rock House, and going to say the Black Sheep.
Yeah, and there's a few coming, like Peter Easton. I've seen a lot of people playing there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but in Toronto on a Friday night, my God, there's 50 bars that have bands, and like some of them have, the Cameron House has like 4 or 5 different rooms that have different bands in them, and that's just one bar. So it's like, though there's way more people, they're also like, it's way more niche in what they like, and like trying to find your niche is really difficult because all of the venues, like, they might be packed, and they're not gonna let you play there if they have 200 people like willing to pay,
And also, like, say if they have, like, the same kind of genre that you're performing, they'll probably just take that over you.
Totally, yeah. And it wasn't until I started getting to know people and like doing some different shows that it felt like I was starting to get some traction. That or have a label. I mean, if you have a label, they'll hook you up.
Yeah, and Toronto like has like some big labels up there. I think that's the location of Universal Music Canada.
Yeah.
And I'm going to name a few people now that currently live, that were from here, but are currently living in Ontario.
Yeah.
Ash Malloy is one of them. She's signed to Wax Records now. Same label that Alyssa Reed in Virginia, the Vegas is on. And then Mozzie, who is originally from Conception Bay South, who lives in Toronto. I had him on the podcast a few weeks ago.
Oh, yes.
And like, as long as you have like a unique sound, or if you have a label, you're probably just going to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and I mean, not to discredit people with labels. I think they're putting in just as much work as any independent artist, and there's different struggles. I don't know. I've never had a label, but I would imagine there's a lot more pressure in that world because, like, when I put out music, if nothing happens, it's fine. Like, I just feel sad, but like nobody else is counting on me to do numbers and stuff.
Yeah.
But if you have a label, I feel like it's like, geez, that single didn't do good. Now what, right? And you're you kind of have to be, and this is all theorizing, I don't know, but I feel like you have to kind of be more present, and you need to be you need to be up on your stuff if you have a label, because they're counting on that. Like, they're investing in you. They need you to, really do it. And so hats off to the people you mentioned. Like, they're doing great. I saw Ashleen at the Horseshoe when she first moved up there, and she was phenomenal. Her band was crazy. I didn't get to see Mozzie, but I seen his stuff on Spotify and stuff, and they're both killing it. Like,
oh yes.
And I'm sure they're gonna find great success in Toronto, like with the connections they have and the quality that they're putting out. Like, they're set,
sure. Now, when it comes to the underground scenes, what's the difference of Toronto's underground scene versus Newfoundland's scene? And I'm just going to mention, no offense to any of the other underground scenes here, but I'm just going to mention St. John's due to the fact that it is the capital city, and that's where a lot of the music happens.
Oh, for sure.
So what are the differences between, say, a scene like Toronto and a scene like St. John's?
I think in what I've observed, the biggest difference is just kind of the interest in the types of music. Like, in Toronto, rap, I think, is probably the biggest scene. Like, if you do a rap show, people come out. Like, there's a huge crowd of people, kind of like you do a trad show here. People come out. But if you're doing things other than that, it's definitely impacted. Like, here, I feel like people are more like likely to be like diehard fans of stuff, and they'll go out to support their friends and family and people they know, and they really cling to like one artist, and they have like their regulars. But in Toronto, it feels like people are more interested in the event, not so much who's playing, right? At least that's what I felt. Like, every time I've had people come out here, it's been friends or somebody I know, or people who've just been following my stuff for years, and they come out and they say, oh, I was a fan of this, right? Where in Toronto, it's more like, everybody dresses a certain way for this event, right? And there's like, it's more themed, and people go out for a night out, not specifically for whatever artist. Mm-hmm. Now, obviously, everything I'm saying is really dependent on, what genres, but I think as a whole, people here are more like, I don't want to say loyal, but they're
receptive?
Maybe receptive. That could be, and Toronto, they're quicker to, I think, dismiss because there's so many artists that you really got to wow them, right?
Yes.
And I had the privilege of playing some really, really cool shows. And it was awesome to play in Toronto because I played at this one gig where there was like 150 people in the crowd. Half of them hated me. I could tell.
What?
Yeah, because it was a rap show. Like there was 10 people that did rap, and then me and my band went up and did like alternative pop, alternative rock stuff. And as soon as I pulled out my electric guitar, like they don't know what's going on because the past 10 acts have been, dudes doing Toronto style hip hop, right? So a lot of people hated it, but also a lot of people were 1,000% down for it. Like the hip hop community, it felt like I really won them over on like in that show, and it was really cool to just have that much emotion, right? Whether it's hate or love, it was cool to kind of like feel the crowd's reception of me. Like I was playing a song and I could see that they hated it. And then I played a different one and they're all cheering and dancing. I'm like, this is sick.
Well,
right?
You won their respect. I can tell you that much.
I think in part.
Now,
Yeah.
the band that you got on the go now is Until Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about how that got started.
So it's me and Ryan Doyle, both from the Lodge. We've been friends for many, many years. Kind of when the Lodge kind of broke up just because I was more interested in doing my own stuff, and it naturally, like, we were doing music because we could and we were friends, but not all of us really were trying to do music. You know what I mean? It just happened that way. So after the Lodge broke up, me and Ryan played together just for fun, like every now and then. And then we knew I was moving to Toronto, say in June. And we're like, why don't we start a band again? So he reached out to his friend Chris Matthews. They met at work, and he's an incredible bass player, but also guitarist, just phenomenal guy. And then Travis Fraze, our drummer, he was part of the friend group. We just know each other really well, and he's always been, he's got a heavy foot. My guy knows how to beat on those drums. So about probably a month before I moved, like a month and a half, we started this band, and I reached out to some people, and we put together a show, played, and we were trying to come up with a name, and I think Ryan said, like, why don't you just, we're a band Until Toronto, and I was like, Until Toronto, right?
That's
like,
it.
That's it. It's a very, like, on-the-nose name, but I think it's a much better name than, like, The Lodge, which is hilarious because we brainstormed The Lodge for, like, months. Like, we were sitting around, we'd hang out and have, like, naming sessions where we're trying to figure out a cool band name, and then we just randomly said Until Toronto. And it's been fun because every time I come home, I get to do that. Now, obviously, the name doesn't really fit anymore because I'm going to Calgary, but I guess I could change it to Until Calgary, but it doesn't have the same zing to it.
No,
I don't
Until
think.
Toronto's great because, like, you're a band Until Toronto because that's a chapter in your life that you say,
Yeah.
hey, I've lived in Toronto for a good amount of years. Now you're moving to Calgary.
Yep.
So you say, hey, this is part of this journey of, creating this singer-songwriter, Alex Duffy, and his friends, too.
Yeah, totally. And we're trying to get together and record some stuff before I leave because we got a few originals as Until Toronto, which I think have the potential to be really good songs. So we're going to actually, I think tonight we're getting together to record some stuff at the house. So hopefully that comes out sooner than later, probably in the fall, I'd say.
And we'll have that on Newfound Releases when it becomes available.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you so much, brother.
Yeah,
now,
thank you.
on the note of that, you're moving to Calgary in about a week's time or so.
Yeah.
What's next for Alex Duffy after that?
I'm not sure. I want to finish the album, and it's complete. I have a single to put out after the album that kind of rounds off the story. But then after that, I kind of want to start fresh and just do singles. I don't want to do anything conceptual because it took up so much mental time. I feel like I almost choked out my creativeness by having to put everything in this box of this story. So I'm really excited to open up and do some fun songs that are more upbeat and so that's kind of what I'm going for. I got to get a job or something in Calgary. I don't know about that part. I hope to play shows.
I'm sure you'll find something.
Fingers crossed, but I'm very excited about whatever the next chapter is. And I hope somehow it has something to do with music, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see.
For sure. Now we're going to play one of those songs off Charlie's Volume 1 in just a moment here on the podcast. Cool. For people who want to find out more about Alex Duffy, Until Toronto, what tour dates he got coming up, and what music he got coming up, where can they go, say, socials and website-wise?
Probably best is to go to Instagram, alex._Duffy. I have a link to all my music in the bio, and that's where I post most regularly. Facebook, I don't really post on it anymore. And Until Toronto, I believe, is just at Until Toronto on Instagram. So you can follow me over there and see kind of what I'm doing and what's coming next.
Well, Alex, it's been a pleasure having you in Newfoundland for the past few months or so, and it was great to get you in before you made the trip back out west. And hopefully this ain't your last time on the podcast, so I hope it's not.
Oh, I hope so.
Well, say if you come by here next summer, we'll do it again. So
100%.
Alex, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. All the best to you in the year ahead, and best of luck and safe travels to Calgary.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, and we'll link up soon.